You will never convince me of the credibility of Merrick Garland or the Biden administration, because Merrick Garland did something truly unprecedented, held a press conference where he announced the indictment of 2 Russians no one ever heard of or had seen before to impugn personally my honor, because we have a show on Friday mornings where we talk about theology and aliens and Bigfoot and things like that. He claimed that Dave Rubin was part of a Russian influence operation without any evidence because Dave Rubin commented on funny viral videos. That's the Merrick Garland DOJ. Now, the questions I have is, he never presented any evidence. It's conjecture and an indictment. He used it to smear me, Benny Johnson, Dave Rubin, and others. The case was dropped informally in December because the election was over, and my lawyers couldn't get them to move on it or publish a statement. These people, I'll make every polite argument I can logically, but my personal experience, having been maligned by evil men using the power of government to destroy their political opponents, I've faced it personally. And when I get a call from journalists saying, explain to me why you're named as an individual in this Russia investigation, the Biden DOJ did a press conference where Merrick Garland comes out, makes a bunch of claims, never proven, and with zero evidence, but they wrote it in an indictment. And then I've got sponsors calling me up. I've got threats, death threats or otherwise, because we licensed a show to another company based in Tennessee called The Culture War, where Friday mornings we would debate various issues, which include flat earth, theology, interdimensional beings, a plethora of nonsense and cultural topics, which does include dating, like our next show we're still doing is going to be dating on November 8th, and routine interviews. Now, Dave Rubin is the most egregious example of how this was a fraudulent DOJ case to prosecute their political enemies, in that Dave Rubin's contract with Tenet was specifically to look at viral videos of like cats and laugh. And Merrick Garland publicly and personally came out and said this was spreading Russian propaganda. So forgive me, but I don't think a video of a cat falling into a tub was Russian propaganda, nor my argument with a geocentrist on why the Earth is the center of the universe. That was a lie. And worse still, I had to hire 2 legal teams because of this. And in December, my lawyer called me and said, the Biden DOJ has dropped the case informally and they will no longer be in communicating with us. And I said, no fucking way. They cannot go on TV and spit in my face like that and then drop it all. It was political. The only reason they did it. So in December of last year, and they have never come out and done anything about it. Now, I'm not about to call the DOJ and say, guys, can we finally wrap this up? However, Lauren Chen issued a statement saying that in April, under Trump, the DOJ formally closed the investigation with no evidence or proof, yet still it is weaponized by the corporate press against me. And that was the Biden DOJ that did it. So these people are unrepentant evil. They are liars, and they did this to destroy their political enemies in media. And now we've got another story. Mike Benz reporting that the Atlantic Council specifically targeted me because in 2020, when the election fraud narrative was going around about Dominion, and the right was claiming that fake ballots and all this stuff, I said that's ridiculous the whole time. And then I said the strategy used by Democrats in 2020 to win was ballot harvesting, which is legal. And that was the key to them collecting these votes. And according to Mike Benz, the Atlantic Council traced back the emergence of the ballot harvesting narrative, which ultimately resulted in 10,000 mules as a bunch of other legal actions, and said Tim Pool is the progenitor of this theory. We need to shut him down. And what happened? YouTube then came down on us with the hammer, banned a bunch of episodes, and suppressed my accounts and channels. The Biden DOJ personally went to various outlets and threatened to suspend and censor people. So we can have a debate on the merits of various legal cases. And that's me being nice, because I think when you get to the bottom of it, Biden's DOJ were crooked as crooked could possibly be. And that's not saying anything about the Trump administration. It's just that I had to live through what those people did, the stress and the death threats I received still to this day, because Merrick Garland is an evil, evil man.
Well, first off,
rant over. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I'm aware of what you went through, Tim. And when I looked at the indictment, it did not allege any wrongdoing by the influencers like you who created content for that company. They
Fake. Never did.
Right.
Another lie.
It described you as an unwitting victim of it. In fact, I looked up the press conference itself. And in the press conference, Merrick Garland did say this: the company never disclosed to the influencers or to their millions of followers its ties to RT and the Russian government. So the only thing I'd say is that I know...
They never released any evidence.
Well,
they dropped the case 2 months later. The play here was simple. They did a press conference on for what reason? For what reason do a press conference and then drop the case a month later? A month and a half later.
I think that the press conference was to call out the Russian actors for infiltrating and trying to influence the election, but they used unwitting influencers. And I think that I understand why you're so pissed off at it.
Well, let me ask you a question in response to that.
Yeah.
What about a debate on modern dating in the United States as Russian propaganda?
Doesn't sound like propaganda to me.
It certainly doesn't. So why is Merrick Garland claiming that I was unwittingly sharing Russian propaganda? Because he's lying.
Well,
and it's ridiculous that listen. The challenge we have in this country largely is that there's a group of people that just believe these evil people. But for me to have to experience it, and I'm sitting here going, guys, we had a guy on who was a geocentrist, and we had another guy on who was a flat earther debating. I don't understand how this is Russian propaganda. Why did the AG go on TV and claim that I was doing that, unwittingly or otherwise?
And you've had people on here who talk about Ukraine on the Ukrainian side against Russia.
Timcast IRL never had a license agreement with Tenant Media.
Yeah, Timcast is different. Culture Wars, where they talk about
it's a totally entirely separate company.
Right, but I'm just saying that I get why you're upset about it. I understand.
He lied.
But I'm just trying to get in Merrick Garland's brain that Merrick Garland is someone who, remember, he appointed a special prosecutor who prosecuted Joe Biden's son. I mean, that's something, right?
No, because he pardoned him.
He took, but not Merrick Garland didn't, but he actually Joe prosecuted Joe Biden's son. That's
meaningless.
Well, also, Matt Gaetz, who was investigated under the Bill Barr Department of Justice, Merrick Garland took that investigation over and then dropped the investigation. He also allowed
because it was bunk.
Well,
So the issue here is this. I'll say the same thing. Just like that, Merrick Garland dropped the Russian influence investigation into Tenet. He does a press conference, says, look at this bad thing that happened, and then 2 months later says, we don't care about that. Would it have been prudent of him to come out and say, we have no evidence, we were wrong, and so we're stopping the investigation?
Well, when they announced the indictments, they came out and said, here's why we're doing the indictments, and they made clear that the influencers themselves, like you, were not involved in this.
That's not the point. The point is he claimed that I'm an idiot who was sharing Russian propaganda through a show that is largely apolitical. And then when he decided there was no evidence and they weren't going to pursue it, he said, let him stew and rot like whatever. I'm going to avoid swearing. Maybe it would have been professional for a man who did a press conference asserting that several high-profile conservative-leaning individuals or politically on the right, you want to malign them and impugn their honor. And then you find out you're wrong. Maybe you then hold another press conference and say, I'd like to formally apologize to these individuals who work for this company. We will not be pursuing this case. We don't have the evidence to do it. Thank you. Goodbye.
Well, first off, prosecutors never do that.
Why is it common for the AG to do a press conference maligning individuals like that?
The only time that they speak is at the four corners of the indictment. They announce the indictment, and then the stuff goes away. And that is something that in the prosecutorial profession, when people are investigated, they often don't even tell them that the investigation is over. So as far as what happened at the end of the investigation, I think he didn't feel the need to apologize to you because he came out and said you were not involved in this. And so for him, he's thinking, that's all I need to do. But that's why I don't...
What was the crime?
The crime was the use of dollars to infiltrate to meddle essentially by the Russians. That the Russians had this influence operation, and it was undisclosed, and it was through RT.
Why publicly announce it?
Because it was an indictment that you announced it at the time of the indictment. It's unethical to talk about it during the investigation. You have to do it.
Every indictment has a press conference?
No, just the major ones.
Right, and so why drop a major investigation?
Why do a press conference on a major investigation?
Why do a press conference for what you ultimately had no evidence for and would drop? Is that common? Maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
they say we have a major investigation into this Russian thing, and then a month later, like, no, we don't care about that.
No, they do. When they have an indictment, not investigate. They weren't announcing an investigation. They were announcing an indictment.
Yep. And the funny thing is,
it would be unethical if they announced an investigation, like James Comey did right before the 2016 election.
It's funny because I end up with two legal teams. And I'm begging them, like, guys, we need to understand what happened here, because I want a full breakdown of this. We'll provide the DOJ with whatever they need, and then we can issue these statements and show these documents and prove what was going on, and then we'll prove in this pursuit, we'll show the culture war which we license is a relatively apolitical show. We've done feminism and politics, modern dating. We've done geocentrism, interdimensional theory, time. We had one guy on talking about MH370. Usually, last Friday, we had a political debate, but it's 80-20 if that, and instead, I get a call saying the DOJ has no interest in pursuing this case at all, and so you have nothing to worry about. And I said, I'm not worried about them not pursuing it. I'm not worried about them pursuing it. I'm worried about them dropping it after accusing me of spreading Russian propaganda. And they said, you know what the assessment is? The real intent of Merrick Garland's press conference was an October surprise. It was launched at the end of September to malign Donald Trump and conservatives, to imply that the moral worldview we shared was actually a manipulation by a foreign government. And as soon as he lost, they dropped it, walked away and said, we're done.
But there's currently still charges against the 2 employees of the Russian state media outlet RT. So it's not totally dropped. Here's informally, they dropped it. Because I guess you'd argue that's a cold case now, that they have no interest in pursuing it. Why would they do that? Why would they launch a press Look, I talked to my lawyers about it. You know what they said? It makes no sense for the AG to launch to have a press conference on an unprosecutable case. Right, but it hasn't been dropped. I mean, it's there. Now, maybe
informally.
It's been dormant because you have a new DOJ, you have new people.
No, they dropped it in December. They told my lawyers it was over and go away.
But not against those 2 individuals, right?
No. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. I contracted 2 different legal firms because their case, pursuing these 2 individuals in Europe, needed our assistance to prove the communications, money laundering or otherwise. But there isn't any, and there never was. And so my lawyers told me, Tim, you need to understand, there is no reason that an AG would launch a criminal indictment against 2 people they cannot prosecute. These men are not in the United States. They don't know where they are. They don't know what they look like, and they will never be found. The only reason you have a press conference about 2 people you can't even begin to prosecute is for political reasons. And you will likely get nothing from this. And then sure enough, in December, they said, your final invoice is in. We've been instructed. It's done. And I said, are they closing it? No. But they're done. I was like, what does that mean? It means there is no case. They were never going to prosecute these guys. They can't prosecute them, and they won't be pursuing it further.
Well, but they've done this before. So the reason why they prosecuted these RT employees is because of election influence operations. But also in 2022, the DOJ also charged Russians for infrastructure, energy grid meddling, trying to target them. This is some of the GRU people, and yet they know they can't hold. The predicate
of their case against these 2 individuals is that I, Benny Johnson, and Dave Rubin spread Russian propaganda.
But
no, he's not claiming we did something wrong. If Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, and Dave Rubin did not spread Russian propaganda, then there is no influence operation.
I think that Merrick Garland wanted to make sure that you were not being targeted by it, as far as that
I was
you were
the only
cleared.
one.
Well,
the 3 of us were the only ones targeted.
Right, but no, he wanted.
No one's going to go try and send death threats to 2 random Russians.
That's the problem. He wanted to make sure that you were not brought into this, like you were not intentionally trying to do anything. And I know what you're saying, but you didn't do it anyways.
How could there be a Russian influence operation if the individuals in question who are unwitting never actually shared Russian propaganda?
As far as Russian propaganda, I don't know what was shared or what was not. As far as but Dave Rubin was accused of a lot of this stuff, and whether or not
the show that was licensed and produced through Tenet for Dave Rubin was funny viral videos. That's it. This is the absurdity. And look, again, you are blindly just believing that the DOJ did something right for no reason. I don't live in that world. I live in a world where we didn't spread Russian propaganda. I've never accepted money from a foreign government. We don't even have investors. We licensed a show that we owned wholly, that we produced internally to a third-party company out of Tennessee for live streaming rights. And then he claimed that we were being paid to spread Russian propaganda because he's a sick, twisted, evil man. That's why. There was no Russian propaganda. No one ever told me what to say. Still to this day, no one tells me what to say. I can say screw Israel. I can say screw Russia. I can say Putin should be removed from power all day and all night. I can say Slava Ukraini. So why is he claiming there was Russian influence and propaganda being spread by me, Benny, and Dave when it never happened. But I don't need to keep saying it over and again because I think you understand. We should talk about Snapocalypse. I don't know if, but I'll give you the final word on that if you did want to have it.
No, you went through hell and back. And I'm sorry you got death threats and had to expend all this money on something where, that's why I'm trying to say that the one difference you and I have is that it is not unusual for DOJ to hold press conferences where they announce indictments, and that's what they did here. Also, Merrick Garland, I just don't think he came into this with a nefarious motive. I think he came into this saying that we have identified $9.7 million of money that was funneled here to try to influence an election, and we're going to call these RT guys out for it. You got caught up in it.
Right before they announced the indictment, the Tenet YouTube gained 200,000 subscribers just seemingly over a day.
So
how does that happen?
I don't know.
Right before they initiated the indictment. Well, nobody knows for sure, but it certainly sounds like a psyop. A channel with 80,000 subscribers that gets no views, that has a variety of random shows that about this, that, or otherwise, some on-the-ground interviews, cultural issues, viral funny videos, and then all of a sudden, overnight, it jumps to 300,000, and the staff go, whoa, 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 what's going on right now? And then, as soon as it hits 300, he comes out and says, look at this major influence operation. It's clearly, to those of us affected, how about this? When I told my lawyers, guys, will they issue a statement? No. Can we ask them to issue? No, they won't do it. Why would they do this right before an election? It is the utmost naivete to assume this was anything other than a political move to help Biden win an election and malign opposition media.
Well, Joe Biden didn't like Merrick Garland. So if Merrick Garland was using his authority to help Joe Biden, that would be news to Joe Biden. I mean, Merrick Garland didn't try to help Biden win. Merrick Garland tried to help Joe Biden or Kamala Harris win an election by appointing a special prosecutor who then embarrassed Joe Biden, Robert Hur, by saying that he didn't have the mental faculties. By the way, that didn't have to be put out there. Merrick Garland made the decision to allow that report to be public, and that was very damaging to Joe Biden. That's why I don't think that Merrick Garland came into this thinking that he's going to help a Democrat get elected. Merrick Garland takes great pains to try to be apolitical. He is disliked by the left.
These are all like personal, non-fact-based statements. I can't. There's no debate on how you feel about what Merrick Garland does. I can only talk about what he did.
Yeah, but he prosecuted the president's son.
Who got pardoned though. So
yeah,
I mean,
but the fact they prosecuted, you wouldn't see this DOJ prosecute Donald Trump's kids.
Criminals and ne'er-do-wells often go through circuitous means to cover up their crimes. It's politics. You want to win points. You say no one's above the law, Hunter, and then Joe's like, look, we'll do this, just pardon him later. And then Joe said he wouldn't, and he did. We all knew it was going to happen. Nobody was blind to this. Look, we live in a world where everybody but seemingly people in the corporate press and Democrats knew Joe Biden's brain was cooked. The first time he said Batacalf care, Trina Shop at pressure, most of us were just like, okay, this guy ain't all with it. Yet they kept going on TV being like, no, everything's fine. So at a certain point...
Sharp as a tack.
Yeah, indeed. At a certain point, I'm just going to be like, these people are lying, and there's no reason to give them the benefit of the doubt. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.